everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I'll be doing a feel-good piece inspired by Studio Ghibli's Totoro, My Neighbor Totoro. I don't know if how many of you have seen that particular anime. I saw it when I was very young and just found it so inspiring and such a fun movie, and it's ever since it's just have a special place in my heart. And whenever I want to relax and I just want to enjoy the painting process, I often go back to this lovable character. So today's piece is homage to a mailbox. A mailbox seems so ordinary, especially back in the day. I remember crossing by and my mom letting me put in letters and mail into the mailbox, and it felt like such a special occasion. Nowadays, I don't even know where the closest mailbox is to my home. But nevertheless, I feel very nostalgic today and feel like I should do a homage to it. So here I'm starting off with a red mailbox. This is not the typical type of mailbox I find in Canada where I live, but it's a typical mailbox I remember seeing growing up when I was in Hong Kong. I usually start my pieces with gouache, add a light layer of diluted gouache. It almost looks like watercolor, and then I usually work my layers up from there. As usual, I am using my soy sauce dish that I don't use for food but use exclusively for painting. I'm working on a 7-inch by 7-inch art block because it feels comfortable and just the right size for me not to feel intimidated about the piece. So far, I have a vague idea of what I want for the piece. I know I want a mailbox and I want My Neighbor Totoro on it, but I don't have a clear visual of exactly the details related to it. But I know I have an idea sufficient for me to get started. For this beginning, a lot of times I actually don't use pencil or any sketches on my watercolor paper. I usually just grab a paintbrush and just start drawing, and that's how I usually roll with it. Of course, I think if I use some kind of pencil or to draw with it, there's probably going to be some lines on the bottom. It might be part of my laziness, and that's why I skipped the step entirely, but so far it's worked for me to just put paintbrush to paper and just paint. I have decided that Totoro is going to be holding a letter. I initially started with a diluted red for the underlayer, and you can see I'm adding a little bit of brown to it. I like how there's an undertone color, so it's not just a flat one-dimensional color. It just makes the painting look so much more interesting. Besides Totoro, I guess a lot of Studio Ghibli movies have been so inspiring for me. Some of my favorite ones include Spirited Away, which I'll probably do another homage piece to it next. Here I'm gonna add the darker colors now that I have the midtones down. I would like to work with two different paint brushes, a thinner one and the thicker one, so I can interchange them readily. I'm always amazed when I look back at my art time lapse how fast these paintings go. When I remember painting it, it took way longer. I wonder sometimes when people look at my painting if it looks really easy, given that the art time lapse is so fast. There's always this perfect time to add on the second layer for gouache. I don't know the perfect timing yet, but it always feels like the painting's very milky and it looks really nice, and I never know if I get it right until I screw up, I guess. Here I'm gonna start thinking about what am I gonna put on the mailbox. have to think about it a little bit more, but I think I like the way things are turning out so far. Nowadays, I often take my mail to the post office directly rather than dropping in the mailbox because I never know how much mail costs. A lot of times when I am going to the post office is to mail off prints for people who bought my artwork. By the way, thank you so much for all of you who are watching so far. I really appreciate you supporting this channel and supporting my artwork. Coming up, I don't even know if I'm going to have that much time to do artwork. As some of you may be aware, I'm a mother of 2 kids. It gets pretty busy, not as much time to paint as I would like. But I'm enjoying the process of motherhood too, so it's something different. And I'm trying to find ways to include them in my artistic endeavors, but they're still young right now, so it's a little difficult. They get distracted easily and have trouble sitting down for long periods of time, which is totally understandable for kids their age. My younger ones do like painting though, or drawing. And they understand that my art table is off limits. And they like watching me paint and draw, so that's a great start, I think. Here I'm just going to draw a little heart on the letter because I don't think I'm going to write anything specifically on the letter. This is a relatively simple piece for me given that there's only a few primary colors that I'm working with. I'm working with Holbein's acrylic gouache. It's an artist grade gouache. I am using primarily burnt umber as well as a scarlet permanent red and also a beige kind of flesh tone color and a bit of white. I'm trying to add outlines for the mailbox, but I don't want them to be completely solid lines. Like the line would be brighter in some area and darker in others just to create more dimension for the mailbox. Adding in the eyes for Totoro. And of course, I feel like he's a little bit lonely, so better add a tiny little character to hang out with him beside the mailbox. At this point, I noticed that I'll probably need to add a little bit of white on top of this tiny character to cover up some of the shadows that I previously added, which is fantastic given that I'm using gouache, so it's easier to layer opaque colors on top of one another, which is one of the reasons why I really enjoy painting with gouache versus painting with watercolor or acrylics. The other thing I love about acrylic gouache is that the colors are so vibrant and matte. It's great for scanning and reprinting. At this point, I'm getting a little bit self-conscious about my letter writing because my husband is a very good calligrapher and my writing is just nowhere near that. So I'm trying my best to make it easy to read, but at the same time artistic and interesting. I use my pinky to balance on the paper so that it'll be a little bit more steady, but at this point not all of the paint has fully dried, so I need to be careful not to smudge the paint underneath. And as I'm writing these letters, it does look a little bit dull and doesn't pop enough, so I probably need to add a little bit of white highlight on parts of the letters so that they will stand out a little bit more. Of course, I usually leave adding white highlights at the very end after I've done everything. I'm debating at this point if I will use acrylic gouache or maybe a Sakura brand jelly pen or jelly roll to see if I had those highlights. At this point, I need to be very steady with my hands as I draw in the details for the eyes, as my brush is not as fine as it used to be. but I do like how the brush produces these thick and thin lines and just make the overall painting so much more interesting. Adding on some layering on. Again, if you enjoy watching these art time lapse, please consider subscribing and sharing this video or other content in my channel. It really does help with putting the word out there about my artwork. Adding on the white highlight. At this point, I think most of the major parts of the artwork's done. I'm just adding in the tiny details. Totoro's eye looks a little bit wincy or kind of small for me, so I decided to go back and add a bit more white and enlarge his eyes a little bit more. Like I mentioned before, acrylic wash is very forgiving and you can always go back and add layers on. And I find his whiskers are not sticking out enough, so I'm just going to add a little bit of white to make them stand out more. And I'll add a ridge to his nose to make it look a bit more interesting. I'm pretty close to finishing at this point. Just adding in a little bit of fur here and there to add texture to Totoro. As you can see in the mailbox, it clearly highlights open at all hours with love. Sending love to all those out there in these times of unpredictable moments in our history. It's even more important to share and send love at all hours. It's kind of new for me to talk through my art time lapse. So if you do enjoy my commentary, please add a comment below. Or if you don't enjoy it, please add a comment below as well, so I know whether I should continue adding commentary to all of my art time lapse. Well, that's it for this piece. This is the Studio Ghibli Totoro inspired all open at all hours with love. I hope you enjoy this art time lapse of this particular piece done with acrylic wash. And I look forward to seeing you in my future videos. Take care.